It's great to welcome you to this episode in our Scaling from the Edge series. And today we're exploring the topic of organisational culture and in particular, learning and development blind spots when teams are more dispersed, as we've seen during the COVID-19 lockdown. And here at ScaleSpace, we're a community of scale-up businesses and our goal is to help them be more successful more quickly. Bringing together leading universities and leading business builders, as we're doing today, we're here to help unlock potential of UK innovation. And as the economy and the country moves out of lockdown, so do we, with ScaleSpace White City, which is being built in conjunction with Imperial College opening on July the 1st. So we're really excited about that. But in the meantime, we're cracking on with our Scaling from the Edge series. Last time we looked at what not to cut. And today we're looking at a potential leadership blind spot around culture and learning and development and how you can support teams to perform even when they're working remotely. And we know from lots of research that purpose and learning are generally ahead of salary in terms of criteria for attracting and retaining talent. And we've also noticed it's easy to lose sight of that when in a crisis and for the focus to be more on survival. And with me today, we've got a great panel and we're going to explore this topic in more detail. I'm delighted to welcome Charles Mindenhall. Charles is co-founder of Blenheim Chalcott, where since 1998, he and his business partner, Manoj Badali, have built more than 30 businesses, largely technology related. And we have Neil Herbert, Chief Finance and People Officer from Salary Finance. Neil has an impressive track record in the financial services industry, working as a CFO, as well as becoming Capital One's first Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer in the UK. And Sankalp Chaturvedi, Associate Professor of Organisational Behaviour and Leadership from Imperial College Business School, where the central focus of his research is in the areas of leadership, mindfulness, interpersonal trust, and organisational citizenship behaviour. So, Sankalp, perhaps to you first. Maintaining culture as an organisation grows is difficult enough in a scaling organisation, but in normal times. So, how important is culture right now, and how impactful do you think it is on motivation and performance?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. And this is a tough time, and especially if you think about that culture is something that ties people together. And with the environmental shock of COVID-19, what we have seen is the culture, the norm itself has shaken to the core. And the companies that were showing lots of signs of flexibility and resilience are the ones doing better than the others. Because this was something that we were trying to react rather than plan for it in ahead of times. And unless there were people showing that strength, rigor, and trying to stay together in this domain, they had lots of challenges. But as we come out, something that we have to think about, it is that people are still tied. What you have to understand is they need more flexibility and more resilience, because when we are trying to work from home, partially even, it's important to realize that people, their work role has evolved.
Following up on that, this idea of there's a bunch of things that are different in people's lives, and that we've seen changes to the way people are working, and we all know working from home is certainly not the same as going to the office. How does an organisation maintain a focus on some of those less transactional, less task-based things at a time like this?
Absolutely. And I must say that, Mark, this is something extremely important to plan. And there are multiple boundaries that we are trying to cross. If you think about what's happening right now, is the boundaries are interfering with each other. Work-life balance, as traditionally we were talking about is balance, now it is work balance. And you are trying to see the boundaries delineate completely when you're trying to think about weekdays and weekends. Multiple things are coming into play and people are not able to do it. What leaders can do is, again, think about staying in touch is important to people, but not staying in touch constantly. Communication should happen frequently, but not with a deadline. Some of the companies, you have realized that when the lockdown started, they were not used to this. Some companies were ahead of the curve, others were not. So they were getting used to that. So they were sympathetic towards it. But now, as we have learned the tricks and traits, and some of them companies are doing better than the others, but you will realize that the lockdown pressure has gone a bit, but the work pressure has increased because there is also a pressure of coming out of the recession. So there are multiple contradictory forces which are trying to make people and employees and leaders interfere with each other's landscape. And that's what something needs to be worked out.
Okay, I think that's a really interesting perspective. Charles, perhaps if I can come to you as a investor, mentor, board member on several organisations, many of them scaling up. We've seen that culture is important, and in some of the younger demographics, putting a culture ahead of salary. Maybe you could give some examples from some of the businesses you're involved in about how you're keeping culture and perhaps organisational purpose on the agenda when the team are dispersed and you can't get them all together easily.
You know, we're all familiar with the first month or two, it's survival, right? We were in survival mode. So I don't think lots of organizations were thinking too much about purpose. I mean, you were thinking about purpose if you had the luxury of thinking about it. You were in survival mode and you needed to get through that. But what was quite interesting about that was actually, I think that survival phase actually often reinforced a company's culture. If when your back's against the wall and you've really got to sort of focus on what really matters, you tend to work out who's really on the team and who isn't, and also what the key behaviors are that need to be exhibited, hence the cultural kind of behaviors that are important in a business. So what I found during the survival phase was it really proved which companies had a strong culture and which ones didn't. When your back is against the wall and you're in survival mode, what really matters in that organization? Does everyone panic? Does everyone run around kind of like headless chickens? And of course, what we saw in some of our companies, I think the vast majority of them actually, were great examples of people becoming very productive, really working closely together, working much more closely than perhaps they ever had before, and actually really living some of the company values that had previously kind of been on the wall and people had talked about and people had tried to aspire towards, but actually it was the kind of survival focus that really exhibited whether those behaviors were true or not. And I think in many of our businesses, this notion that Sankalp mentioned, this notion of resilience really came to the fore. And you know, people talk about resilience as something they want to build in their companies and the people in their companies, you know, in all our children that we have and things like that. You want them to be resilient. Talk about it all you like. You can give lessons on it as much as you like, but there's nothing like living through a period in which you have to be resilient. That teaches you can be resilient, okay, that you can get through dark times and difficult times. And so I thought the resilience aspect was really important. And then Sankalp, I also thought raised a very good point about flexibility and adaptability and agility. That the companies that have kind of got through this and managed through it, it's not that they haven't been faced with inordinate challenges, but that the ones that had a sort of culture of flexibility and a bunch of people in them who had agile enough, flexible mindsets to get through it, were the ones, again, that I think have battled through it and will come out strongest at the end. Not just in terms of tackling the problems and the challenges, but also now we're coming through lockdown, starting to see where some of the opportunities might be as well. And I think the thing that perhaps exhibits that the most is this notion of curiosity. It's people kind of looking around thinking, right, how do I operate now in this new world? Where are my opportunities to succeed? I can't do everything like I did it before. I can't just carry on kind of cycling the bike like I did day in, day out for months beforehand. I now need to think about different ways in which I'm going to operate.
I think there's something around the environment and the situation, as you say, that's forced people to have to actually deal with a crisis, and that does either bring people together or smashes them apart. And I think we've seen with some scaling organizations in that phase, they tend to be predisposed to be more agile. And so the idea of culture coming to the fore, even perhaps accidentally, I think is fascinating. Neil, I've turned to you, perhaps in a less accidental way. You've had to deal with your acquisition, Salary Finance's acquisition of Neighbour, and the idea of bringing together two organizations and thinking about team development and culture as you acquire a business and then deal with that as lockdown kind of hits right in the thick of it. Can you say a little bit about how you've been dealing with that and how that's worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been incredibly interesting, Mark, as you can imagine. So we acquired Neighbour, which is was our nearest competitor, on the 9th of March, and then on the 16th of March, we had to take the difficult decision of closing both the offices down and asking everyone to work from home. And we developed all the detailed integration plans that you do for when you're doing a big acquisition like that. But we really not built in the impact of a global pandemic. And as Sankalp said, you're then in reactive mode rather than kind of planning mode. But as I look back on the last couple of months now, I think you can frame a lot of what we focused on as being around culture development and bringing the teams together. And as Charles said, it really reinforces, I think, some of the the true values and cultures of an organisation when you put in that kind of situation where you can almost kind of throw the plan out the window, and it's about survival, it's about replanning, it's about flexibility and adaptability. And for us, our first priority was obviously the well-being of our teams. Culturally, that's very important to us as a well-being business. That we demonstrate care in these challenging situations. So we're making sure that people had all the kit they needed to work effectively from home. We shipped chairs and monitors and stuff out to people. We made sure we were consciously thinking about people's mental well-being. So giving access to online GPs, employee assistance programs. We took the very early decision to equalise the sick pay policies between the two businesses, equalise them upwards, such that people weren't stressed about the fact that they if they did need to take time off due to COVID or other related illnesses, they won't be penalised. And then really surveying people and checking in with them about how they're finding working from home, and if there's anything we can kind of do to support them in that. So that was our first thing, was really about well-being, and I think that's really culturally important to us. Secondly, our main kind of business priority had been to restart Neighbours Lending using our own funding sources, and that from a business perspective was our number one priority. But what actually that gave us the opportunity to do was to get the two teams, the existing Sorry Finance team and the Neighbour team, working together on a really, really critical shared objective, an important thing for building a one team culture, and fantastic morale boost to everyone that when we were able to kind of deliver that on time, and celebrate some tangible success of working together. And that was a great development opportunity for people. It's certainly one of those I guess CV worthy moments when you're able to deliver a material project like that in that kind of situation. And then thirdly, again from a cultural and development perspective, we set up a virtual onboarding program. So we recognised that a third of the team was new to Sorry Finance, and also hadn't if you joined us by choice, researched the business and applied. So how do we make those people feel part of our team? And one way was this virtual onboarding program, which we made available to everyone, not just the new team. And it had kind of it's ongoing actually, so it has practical elements to it, like the history of Sorry Finance, deep dives into the products and how they work, deep dives into the economics of the business, how we make our money, but also and really importantly, cultural aspects. So values was really important to us, that we talked about and shared our values across the new organisation. We found the values of the two businesses are very similar. What unites us is what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve, and the people we're trying to help. We're doing get to know sessions, starting with the leadership team. So get to know yourself in get to know people in 15 photographs. I've done mine. It certainly brought a lot of smiles to people's faces, showing pictures of me as a goth when I was a teenager. And we've used technology such as the Donut app to kind of allow people to have virtual coffee breaks with each other and to get to know each other on a more kind of personal level as we try to bring the two teams together, and you try and recreate some of those interactions and people bouncing together that you would get a bit more naturally in a physical environment. So I think looking back at the things we have focused on have been all around building a single team that's kind of stronger together. Just the way we've gone about it wasn't the way we'd originally planned, and so we've had to be creative and adaptive, as Charles said.
Great. And look, I think in there, this sort of idea of clear shared goals and objectives that people can rally around, and to Charles's point, early in the crisis, clearly one of the primary goals was around survival, and that was something that I think allowed scale-up organisations to get people really focused on that as almost as a kind of super objective above all else.
Yeah.
And making that possible in salary finance, so people kind of all understood what you were trying to do, sounded like it was really important. And Sankalp, from your research, what about the evidence that companies that do focus on team development and culture are somehow better performing, and they create better performing teams? Is that something you've observed?
Oh, several times. And there is long-standing research, even without a crisis, that people make the place. And the companies that are focusing on people and team development are the ones doing extremely well performance-wise. And what Neil has said, one thing that I would say, first of all, congratulations of trying to manage something so hard in so difficult time, because even trying to build and merge cultures is a big deal, even without a crisis. And during the crisis, trying to do that in a structured way, I think is exceptionally thoughtful of you guys to work with. So I would really want to commend you on the approaches, because people are the central asset of any organizations. And if you're trying to take care of them by different things of resources that you could provide, the sick pay, people notice that. People actually care about that a lot more, that the companies are actually not only involved or think about me as a tangible thing working for them, but also that leaders are caring for me. And it's only the extra efforts that we do for them makes them do work even on the weekends. So because they feel that they belong to that one team vision, the purpose itself is very significant. So yes, people are significantly important. They will always remain important. And now we have shown with different phases that technology can help us, enable us to do that as well.
And so I think I think we all sort of intuitively get that's important. But I think back to your point, Charles, about the, in the crisis, there's a sort of survival mode and a survival phase. And then when you start to come out of that, there's, purpose might become more important, and clarity of perhaps objectives and goals. But how as a investor or a board member or mentor, how do you help people spot when that kind of transition happens of, actually now we've kind of got to align around some new purpose, or we've got to create some space in the organization to understand what our learning is and do something with it to take the organization forward? Because that sounds like it's tricky.
Well, I think first of all, we're all making it up as we go along a little bit, because we've never been through this situation before. So
That's true.
I can tell you what our experience is, as opposed to whether we're doing it well or not. I think obviously the last 3 months have been a salutary lesson in the joy of video conferencing, and particularly Zoom that we're on at the moment, but many other kind of means of communicating and collaborating with people. And I think we've all had to do a lot more of that than was historically the case. So kind of new ways in which we manage businesses as boards, as investors, and as leaders have obviously been required, and we've all gone on that learning curve. I think the lesson is kind of more has been required, more communication, more collaboration, more learning about what is going on in the businesses in order to be able to adjust and change course and be as flexible as we've just been talking about. I think the thing that we're all experiencing now is, right, we've kind of hopefully got through that turbulence, and we've all kind of adjusted and adapted to new ways of working with kind of much increased collaboration and communication. Now we need to think how we adopt a rhythm for the future that makes sense for the businesses that we're investing in and operating, and also how we spend enough time now to think about what the future holds, and then adjust and adapt what the skills and capabilities are that people need in the businesses in order to operate effectively. And again, that's changed because our market context has changed. The priorities we have as a business has changed, and the way that we operate together has changed. So you sort of need to go, right, we need a new kind of plan for the business, but we also need to think about the capabilities and support we need, that people need in those businesses as well, operating in that new way. And I think that's the phase that we're now going through, and that's the phase that we're seeing and living through live at the moment, which is that sort of transition to phase 2, if you like, of a sort of coronavirus world.
And something we talked about on the last one of these was this sort of idea of being a pandemic fatigue. So as you start to try and rev people up around phase 2 and getting them excited about the future, how any thoughts on how you kind of keep people going?
I think you have to kind of draw a close to phase 1. I mean, this is a bit like a sort of 3-act play, isn't it? Where you have to kind of give people a form of closure. We had to go through this tremendously complicated and challenging time. Now we've got through that, well done. And probably some form of acknowledgement of that in some way, shape or form would be quite good. You sort of, it's like a story, isn't it? But you typically have 3 acts, right? So act 1 maybe has been the kind of lockdown, everyone quarantined, get through it with all the ups and downs. But now we can think about how we might move into phase 2 and what phase 2 might require, and give people a chance to sort of get their heads around it. I do think inevitably people need to think about their kind of mental and physical sort of capabilities as you go into phase 2. So I do think there is an opportunity to pause for breath, for people to take a break. It's been fairly all-encompassing, hasn't it, for everyone. And so now there is this opportunity to go, right, take a break, have a breather, make sure we do that, because it's going to carry on for some time. And you know, how you help your organization to give them the space to do that, but also look after people's mental and physical kind of well-being in order for them to be able to be productive as you go into the next phase is going to be very important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a really, really, really important point. Neil, just coming back to you, Charles there touched on our rapid learning curve on video conferencing technology. But in terms of how you think about an organization and with the number of colleagues that you've got in salary finance, do you think the technology enables you to manage people effectively and think about their development and how you manage their well-being and their performance?
Yeah, I think, I mean, as I think about that, you know, last year we, you know, 2 of our big people priorities were making sure we put in place, you know, like a fit for purpose performance management process, but also from a development perspective, implementing a leadership and people management development program. We recognized that our biggest, most impactful development opportunity as an organization was really in terms of, you know, developing our leaders and people managers, many who are new to leadership or new to people management, and you know, the crisis has certainly, you know, impacted on both of those areas. And you know, from a performance management perspective, the acquisition of Neighbour, the COVID crisis has like changed the way I guess we've been thinking about it in the short term. I mean, partly from just like practical reasons, such as, you know, Neighbour didn't have a performance management process. The goals that we'd set at the start of the year for salary finance, to some extent, you know, were thrown out of the window, with much, you know, superseded by much shorter term goals in terms of, as Charles said, you know, survival, integration, how do we work from home effectively. Those became the, you know, the overriding short term priorities. So we're not going through a normal kind of performance management process, if you like, at mid-year. We're making sure that we give people feedback and that we listen to feedback, We're making sure that people are educated in our processes, but really fundamentally importantly, making sure that now as we're at the end of Act 1, as Charles said, that we're kind of setting clear goals and priorities for people for the second half of the year. Act 2, which is the panic's over, but we're kind of, we're not back to normal. What are the areas we need to focus on, and how do we need to behave? From a developmental perspective, I think, if I reflect on it, I think if obviously there are challenges, but if you can frame this as really creating real opportunities. A couple of examples. So one is, I think, what this has done, both the acquisition and COVID happening at the same time, is thrown up some really kind of cool, exciting CV-worthy projects for people to get involved in that have like a real impact on the business. And so you can give people real meaningful development opportunities, which are, probably a lot more valuable than, some of maybe the more, structured training that we might have otherwise done if we'd been in a face-to-face environment. And, we've continued also to kind of focus on leadership development, because it's, even more critical in the current environment. So again, coming back to the Charles's analogy of the end of Act 1, we had last week a half-day workshop with the leadership team and one of the coaches we've been working with, really reflecting on the this year so far. And we've obviously been through a project to acquire, an acquisition, an integration, the COVID crisis, and it just felt like a super valuable time to reflect on how we've been as leaders and what we've learned about ourselves individually and as a leadership team. What are the things that we want to build on? What are the things that we might want to kind of dump and leave behind us? It was a really valuable exercise. And we've also been doing lots of listening and feedback gathering. So the people we work with on the leadership training are actually doing a crisis in leadership survey diagnostic, and we've offered to be part of that. It was free, so why wouldn't we? And they're going to talk to 15 of the colleagues in the team around, okay, how have salary finances leadership stood up through these times? What are the things that you've seen and observed them doing and not doing? What would you like to see more of, less of, that kind of thing? And then just involving people. Mm-hmm. We're involving people in the return to the office planning, moving into the wonderful new White City space in a couple of weeks' time. Having lots and lots of group meetings, one-to-one meetings, Q&A with leadership, and that kind of thing. And so I guess what we've been doing is really trying to kind of identify opportunities in the situation that we're in to develop and support the team, again, adapting to kind of that environment. To really reframe it as, okay, what opportunities does this give us in terms of development and leadership?
And Sankar, just perhaps you might have some perspectives on virtual leadership or mental well-being and how to kind of think about that at this time.
Yeah, certainly. Actually, I have ongoing research on both of them. So maybe I can tell you a few things on that. Yes, as Charles mentioned on the pandemic fatigue, and we are trying to recover from it. We have done some research on mindfulness because we try to do that. And it has shown that mindfulness training has actually helped dramatically improve the well-being aspect of especially the mental well-being, because as we come out of the pandemic, we are looking for what social psychological effects on the sleep patterns or stress, anxiety, and the job performance. And we do find that mindfulness training and 20 minutes of doing that mindfulness training is actually helping people recover from it. And even the sleep is improving. So that's something, because of the lockdown pressure, the pandemic thing, we could see that people are changing that behavior on such. And even for the virtual leadership, so just to tell Neil as well, we have done some research on that as well. 53% of the people in the survey that I did found that leadership through virtual mode is dramatically different than the leadership that would be done in a physical world. So that kind of says that we might have to learn few more skills that goes beyond what we are aware of or what we thought was traditionally important. Listening becomes extremely important in a virtual world, and the emphasis is on actively listening, because I can be looking at you, but I'm not active because my mind is somewhere else, right? So it's not the physical presence of me looking at you, but it's about how much I can engage with you becomes a lot more important. And unlike in the physical world, when I'm talking to you, I'm looking at you. But if it happens in a virtual world, I might be looking at the camera on the side, but you're thinking that I'm talking to you. So that kind of engagement, the non-verbal aspect of leadership also becomes significantly important. Empathy is coming out to be very strong. We can say that because of the pandemic or the lockdown or the fatigue, the empathy is important. But we are learning virtual empathy is going to be as important as we come out of it as well. So how do we actually empathize virtually in one-to-one domain? Because we can't do it from one to many when you have in a Zoom meeting and something sad or something you have to talk about. So that aspect is coming out more prominently as well.
Right. I mean, I think that's fascinating, and I think a top tip of maybe thinking about mindfulness might be important for all of us. I mean, look, we're sort of running out of time here, so I guess what we've heard around today is Sankalp, you sort of introduced this by saying you thought culture had been shaken to the core, and then we've talked a little bit about the phases that we've been going through, and perhaps just sort of as we come out this first phase, the survival phase. Now we're moving into perhaps a period of refocus, rebuild, common objectives, the need for agility and the need for more rapid cycles. I think we've heard a lot about the need to be caring and the need for communication, bringing people together, listening, communicating, collaborating, and Sankalp, your point on empathy, I think is really important. And I think we're learning new ways and new tools, and we are, to an extent, as Charles said, making this up as we go along. So I think there will be, for successful organizations, my view, and we're seeing this across scale space, that organizations will have a new plan. And I think today we've heard about how that new plan will need perhaps different skills and capabilities than what people have been used to. And that, I think, creates a new dimension for leaders to deal with. So perhaps just to sort of wrap up today's conversation, which I think has been fantastic, by the way, maybe each of you could just give us a kind of takeaway top tip for organizations as they think about leadership and development and culture at this time. Maybe come to Charles, if you'd like to go first.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Sankalp and Neil as well, for sharing your insights. I do think there is now a hunger amongst certainly the folks in our businesses for more learning and development. And I think the time has come to work out what the right kind of learning and development is that you're going to provide to people to help them tackle the next phase of whatever it is that's in front of us. So I think there's an acknowledgement that some of those things could have been put on hold for a while, and now think there's an opportunity to provide more of that. I think you need to think hard about how you do that in a virtual environment with a limited opportunity to kind of meet people live, and how you orchestrate that through video conferencing and through panel discussions like the one that we're on, that can help people with how they're going to tackle what they face in the future. And I also think, to Sankalp's point, trying to find ways in which, we're not all just meeting virtually, but ways in which we can get together physically and re-establish some of those connections will be very important for people.
Great, thank you. And Neil?
Yes, I think for me it would be something about mindset or framing. I think it's very easy. Now we're out of the immediate panic phase of the crisis, to continue focusing on things that you can't do, and the negatives and the constraints. And I think changing your frame to stop focusing on the things that you perceive you can't do, and instead kind of looking for those opportunities to do things differently and adapt your goals and be creative. I think that's true for scale up businesses in any times. Really, you can spend your time thinking about the structural disadvantages you have against the incumbents in your markets, or whatever, or you can change your frame and use those constraints as drivers and inspirations for creativity and inspiration and innovation. And I think that the crisis is an ideal time to kind of challenge your frame and look for the opportunities to do things differently and to disrupt markets.
Great. And Sankal.
Yes, so there are a couple of things that I would encourage for the leaders to think it through. Purpose still remains the same, but the important is currently social distancing is the only vaccine. So when they are planning to think about the exit strategies are coming out of it, it's important to think about a 2x2 in a way. What tasks are more important for the tasks that you are doing versus not? And also what can be delivered in a socially distant or virtual world or not. As people will realize that there are some more core parameters that has to be done physically versus not, their approach of framing the work, framing the effort of people will narration, the framing of that would change. So something to think it about in short term. Purpose still remains the core. The agility that we are talking about can also be defined as more critical versus non-critical. And that's what would be the key to work it out. And as we give the structure to people, they will start following it.
Thank you very much. So I just want to say a big thank you to the panel, Sankal Chaturvedi, Charles Mindenhall and Neil Herbert. Thanks to everybody who's watched today's episode, and encourage you to sign up for future episodes on our website, which is scalespace.co.uk. So thanks so much for joining us, and thanks to the panel.